Welcome. I'm here at Right Turn Addiction with Woody Giessmann, the CEO and founder of this wonderful treatment center. How many years has your program been around?
You know, that's interesting because we just celebrated 10 years. You know, 10 years ago, in March of 2003, we opened up the doors just to see what would happen.
Mm-hmm.
We turned on the phone, we opened the door and said, let's just see what happens here, you know.
Well, that's a testament. I mean, 10 years, that's a huge milestone to know that your program is working and everything and people are really getting into what you're doing.
Well, you know, I mean, it's an interesting thing for me because it's like, who was attracted to Right Turn? You know, a lot of creative type of people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, people that were musicians or painters, poets, creative individuals, but not just limited to the arts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had contractors and plumbers and, you know, roofers, doctors and nurses come to us. But you know, it was mostly people who had tried to get clean and sober in kind of more of a traditional kind of program, that more institutionalized feel, but didn't respond well to that hospital setting,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and they needed help in kind of a different way, and you know, that's kind of where I come from. You know.
Well, because, I mean, if you think about it, the person that's coming here for recovery, you know, they have to have a place to feel free and safe and to express themselves as well. I mean, if you kind of bring somebody in and you say, okay, this is how we are, this is what we do, you know, here's your room and enjoy your stay, and hopefully it works for you. Sometimes it doesn't. And it's great to have a place that thinks outside of the box.
Well, yeah, you know, and you know, and you raise a good point that people really do need help, but sometimes they're not able to use their words to express themselves in individual therapy. Sometimes they need group therapy, but sometimes they're able to express themselves, you know, through a different language like music or art or writing, and express themselves in ways, you know, that individual therapy, talk therapy, or group therapy are not working for them necessarily, you know, and so they can find a better way of expressing themselves, you know. And, you know, that's kind of an important piece for me, is to first off help people feel safe and treat them with respect and help them get down to the underlying issue, you know. I mean, for me, if someone comes to me and says, well, I've been drinking alcohol, you know, I have to wonder, are they self-medicating? Are they depressed? Is there an underlying issue that needs to be addressed? And can we help them discover that? And, you know, are they self-medicating with alcohol? And can we help them address that? Can we give them an opportunity to kind of get down, reach down inside, deep down inside, even if it's through music, man, you know? You know?
Well, I mean, you have to think there's got to be some underlying issues of why this person is either, you know, drinking or taking some form of substance. I mean, it's not just, oh, they decided to start and then they got addicted. Usually there's some underlying reason for it.
In many cases, you're right. In many cases, you're right. But the you know, the issue is that probably about 60% of the people who walk into my office are going to have some form of a genetic predisposition to substance use or substance use disorder. Are they depressed before they came in, or are they depressed because of the alcohol? You know. Which came first, man, the chicken or the egg?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we got to figure out, right?
I totally get it, yeah. I know that you said your program is very free-thinking, so what is your program based on? Is it more holistic? Is it the 12-step? Or does it, I know that you said you think outside the box. Can you go more in depth into that? Or
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, that's a really good question because all of our practices are kind of evidence-based practices. We know that individual therapy works. We know that addiction education and relapse prevention work. We know that family therapy, if introduced in treatment, has about a 30% greater outcome. We also know that if we're addressing underlying issues, that psychiatry can be very helpful, and not just for medications, but sometimes we do use medications, right? But to get a clear assessment and evaluation of what's going on with this person. We also use group therapy because group therapy is very important as well. And even 12-step recovery can, offer, statistically some really good outcomes, what we do. So everything we do here is evidence-based practices. It's all, therapies that research would support. But we feel, myself and Abby Dean, our clinical director, have always felt that that music and painting and art and writing also have are very useful in the treatment of people as a expressive therapy. So we're evidence-based, but we're also creativity.
now with the
Did that answer your question?
absolutely.
Oh, okay.
I was just curious with the creativity, when people do the journals and other things, do they use that in the form of, with groups, do they usually do that? Or if they're having problems, do guys get together and maybe, let's say, jam in order to express their feelings? Or how would that?
No, I mean, we're a very structured program in that way. When we say it's art therapy, we mean it's therapy with art. They're going to be doing some of that work and looking at those underlying emotional or psychological issues in group therapy, but at the same time they're using their hands or their brains in a different way and expressing it a different way through art. And sometimes, as I said before, music and art they're a different language. It's just a different language, a different way of putting your feelings into words.
It's really profound, and it's a great way to have the self-expression and get those emotions out and those feelings rather than keeping them bottled up where they can cause you harm.
Well, and that's true too, and especially for someone who is, I've worked with many, musicians, right? People who have run into that brick wall, and they've been hijacked by their addiction, and they're no longer, able to go out and perform music. So how can we help them celebrate their recovery and celebrate their creativity and get back to a productive lifestyle? It's very important for us to help people, whether or not they're a creative person or they're going back into some other kind of work, but help them understand that recovery is a great thing, and that they can celebrate that through their creativity, but they can celebrate getting back to a productive lifestyle. A lot of times, creative people, filmmakers, painters, poets, whatever, have come to me and they kind of give me an indication that their creativity has been hijacked by their addiction. That drug use helped them at one point, and then it stopped helping them, and then they paint this beautiful picture of how a drug use or what other addictive piece has now begun to hurt them.
Yeah, I completely understand with that, where people may think that this drug or this drink or whatever they're doing, it furthers their creativity, but then it winds up just it doesn't serve a purpose, and you start to wonder if even if it ever did.
Right.
Because I've read a lot, and also on TV you hear a lot about with musicians, and they say, boy, I didn't know if I was going to be creative without what I was using to get, whether it was an illegal drug or alcohol. in the form of my creativity, and I didn't know if I'd be able to do what I was able to do. But they realized that that was just, it wasn't what they were taking, it was just holding them back.
Yeah. Well, you know, but I think even like our, you know, my friend Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers,
Nice.
who said, you know, when I was young and I was out there doing everything, I felt like I had to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't helping me figure out what I wanted to do or how to be the best musician in the world, but I was still doing it. And I kept going and kept going, and so that's a part of his story, you know. And that's a part of my story as well, as the drummer for the Del Fuegos for many years. That drugs and alcohol was a part of my story, but at some point I made a wrong turn instead of a right turn. Haha, that's my right turn joke, man. And you know, and it started hurting me, and it started taking away my ability to be the best musician ever. But drugs and alcohol were definitely a part of my story at one point, you know. But this is now, you know, this is the face of addiction here, but I want you to look at me as also the face of recovery, you know. And I think that it's important that I stand up and say, and you know, and celebrate recovery with so many clean and sober artists out there, and say, hey man, you know what? Life in recovery is really amazing.
Well, you guys are a shining example of that. I mean, you know, you show that it can work and what it means and what it can do. I mean, if you look at a lot of other people that have suffered from that, whether it be, let's say, Tommy Lee or Eric Clapton, and a lot of people didn't think they were going to make it. And they proved that, you know, to have perseverance and the willingness to say, I need help, and where can I go for recovery? And to know that if you don't make it, if you don't do it, you might not make it. You might not be here. To know that you guys are doing that, that proves that it works, despite what anybody says.
Yeah.
You know? And all you need is that helping hand of that friend or that loved one or somebody that cares about you to say, come on in here, listen to what I have to say. Do you feel there is a stigma when it comes to addiction and treatment?
You know, I do. And those are two separate issues with me. Because I feel that there's a stigma around addiction and substance use as a disorder. And I feel that people have this image of what addiction looks like. And it's not pretty. And I really feel that it's important that I be respectful when I talk about addiction, because I do know that it can happen to anyone. It can happen to to your best friend or your family member. It can happen to politicians, and it can happen to police officers. It can happen to anyone. It's a genetic predisposition that we look at. But most people have watched too much TV, too many movies, and they think that addiction kind of looks like this. You're a bad person, or you're a homeless person, and that's the face of addiction. The fact of the matter is I spend an absorbent amount of my time trying to help people understand that just because you struggle with substance use disorder or some form of an addiction does not make you a bad person, you know. But as far as treatment is concerned, the stigma around treatment, why can't this person just get it, right? Why can't they just stop, you know? I feel like that there's an awful lot of that can be addressed there as well. And we look at the research, and we find that the longer someone is receiving help, and sometimes a little help goes a long ways, but the longer someone is receiving help, the better the outcome. Especially for young people whose brain development has been interrupted by chemical dependency.
Well, also, I mean, if you think about it, when you're a teenager and you're young, you think you're bulletproof, and you can do anything. You know,
I did.
I'm a superhero, and nothing's gonna hurt me. You know, now I can try this and that, and you find out that when you're that age and you start getting yourself involved in certain things, if you go down that road, you know, it might be okay. You know, it might just be a one-time thing, or it might be recurring, and you might dipping your toe into, you know, some real heavy stuff. You know, once you're in that pool, you might not be able to get out.
Well, you know, addiction is a disease. It's not a choice.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And, you know, for me to be a young guy with this feeling in bulletproof and invincible, I'm a superhero, and, you know, definitely Superman. You know, that's a delusional thought process. Delusional meaning false belief.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, sometimes when we look at alcohol as the number one drug that people are introduced to, you know, nicotine, marijuana, alcohol, that it helps them feel invincible. Mm-hmm. You know, it helps you with that liquid courage, mm-hmm. so that you're not afraid to do things. And sometimes maybe you'll do things that you probably never would have done had you not had some alcohol, you know. But it's that brain, the disease of the brain, the part of the brain, the emotional brain, the limbic system, you know, down to the amygdala in the brain that is affected by substance use disorder, that causes this kind of developmental delay and kind of this kind of setback developmentally that causes people to be, you know, arrested in development, right? And so that's the piece, you know. And then you have the people that look at them and say, why can't they just stop, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's more easy to say that than to, you know, because then you try to divorce yourself or step away from the issue, like you're not involved, and you know it you know, I don't need to deal with it, where, you know, it's just a kind of way of being a scapegoat sometimes. You've dealt with this for a long time, over 10 years, and probably everything that you've seen when you were younger and even now, I'm sure you've seen many things. Do you feel that addiction can still run in families where it's the heavy lineage down? You can really trace it back to say there is really something here, you know, whether it might be Sue down the street or Bob in his office, that is there a reason why this person is doing this? Is there a history of it that they might not even know about it, or they do, but they've just kind of blocked it out?
Well, yeah, you know, I believe that it's biological, sociological, right? Mm-hmm. I believe that you know, genetically, that speaks very loudly. Myself, you know, I'm just celebrated 23 years of my own personal recovery.
Congratulations! That's awesome, man. Way to go!
And I say that as an Irish and Native American Indian. That me personally, I'm a genetic predisposition to addiction, without a doubt. But you mentioned family because sometimes, you know, it's that what you're exposed to and what is acceptable in family, mm-hmm. You know, can leave someone at a higher risk because, you know, Uncle Joe comes over and drinks, you know, heavily, mm-hmm. then, you know, why can't I? But if I do that, will I be able to get up the next morning and without a drink, mm-hmm. you know? Mm-hmm. You know, Uncle Joe can, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I can, mm-hmm. right? But we also know the research would support that alcoholism it actually can skip a generation. Interesting piece. That you may have in your family history several people that struggled with depression or alcoholism or whatever, and then your parents might be okay, but you might be still as equal high risk.
Yeah.
Did that make sense, man?
Absolutely, absolutely. I've heard that about a lot of things, and especially an issue like this where it might, like you said, might not get the parents, but it might get their kids or even their grandkids. It's gonna wind up getting you somewhere, and it's bound to happen.
Mm-hmm. Or anyone who grew up under that roof with those rules, right?
With the restraints and everything of all the law and order and the strict rules of you have to do this
or lack of rules.
That's an interesting question because I have a lot of friends that are married and have teenage kids, and you wonder that if they want them to be, as a parent, you have a choice of, do you want your kid to be your friend or do you want to be a parent? And if I give them too many rules or restrictions, will they not like me? And will they turn away? So I'm going to let them do whatever the heck they want to do because it's fine. And they'll be able to handle themselves really well. And then before you know it, without any questions, it hits you like a Mack truck.
Right.
That, okay, my kid's in trouble, or, I've in trouble by my doing, or in trouble with the fact that I haven't given them any structure. Not fully restrained, but just a little guidance to know that they'll be okay and that they'll survive and that they won't wind up like countless other people where you give them too many restrictions and they don't make it. With your experience of doing this, do you feel that there is a drug of choice for today, or is it all of just like it's all in the pot, whether it's alcohol or or maybe another substance of heroin, cocaine, marijuana? Do you feel that there's a tide turning? Or is it more prescription, or?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting piece, and I think that, we've said since the 1970s that marijuana is a gateway drug, and we now know that I'm sorry, let me start that over. A drug is a drug is a drug is a drug. And we've looked at substances like marijuana as the gateway drug, which we now know is actually a gateway drug because it affects those neural pathways in such a way that it sets you up for further risk for substance use down the line and other addictions. But to answer your question, I would probably have to say alcohol will always be the leading candidate there, but it's regional. And here in New England, we have an epidemic of opiates, which are, prescription medications like Percocet and OxyContin and Vicodin and these sort of things that are in the opiate family, the painkiller family, and that are accessible in anyone's medicine cabinet, but also because we have a lot of college students here in New England, we have a lot of people getting it off the internet. And it typically is a very expensive drug, buying Percocet off the street, and can graduate into heroin use, which is the grandfather of opiates. And so we do have an opiate epidemic in New England. Now, if we were on the other side of the country, up in the greater Northwest, we would be talking about methamphetamine. Right?
Yes, well, because it's so cheap to make, and a lot of people are doing it now.
And because it's so accessible and it's so addictive that anyone with a predisposition to depression or anxiety or even a predisposition to addiction is going to be quickly hooked in.
And the interesting thing with that is, if you look at methamphetamines, it ages you like in 5 minutes.
Not a pretty thing.
It's unbelievable.
Not a pretty thing.
And I mean, there's so many people that have gotten hooked on it. It's just amazing how it sucks you in.
Well, and it changes the it changes the chemistry of the brain very quickly, as much as opiates change the creates dysregulation in the brain. Methamphetamine does as well. But if we were in Nashville, Tennessee, we would be talking about alcohol, because there is no huge opiate piece, and there's not a huge amphetamine piece or methamphetamine piece, but alcohol is the primary, So it's regional, just to speak to your question there.
Do you feel that in terms of with what we see now with musicians and people in the creative world, do you feel that they turn to something for release, whether it be drugs or alcohol or anything? Do you find that they're more prone to do these type of things than somebody else? That they have more of a searching and more of a need for it, or is it basically can happen to anybody?
Well, I mean, it could happen to anyone, but as a traveling musician for many years, it's also accessible. And I have to say, there is absolutely nothing normal about getting on a tour bus and barreling 80 miles an hour down the highway, sitting backwards at a table, having dinner, heading towards a sound check or an interview. It's a lifestyle unlike anyone else's. That you're going to be thrown up under these hot lights and glorified for 2 hours, and then it all starts all over again. And I think that, I speak for myself and many other musicians, that there's an awful lot of self-medicating going on. The hours are long and painful, and the traffic, the traveling is awful, sitting and waiting and hurry and waiting and hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. That it's not surprising to see people turn to drugs or alcohol or some form of an addictive behavior while they're on the road. I mean, sex and drugs and rock and roll. But it's not just rock and roll. It's jazz, it's blues, it's classical, it's any form of music,
Well, I mean, it must be that you love the fans and you love what you're doing, but it's like, what am I going to do with the rest of my time here? And then your mind starts to wander, and you probably feel that you don't have any family or nothing, no one to turn to other than the guys that are in the band, or maybe the people on the film set.
You have to make some decisions.
Yeah.
Who are you going to surround yourself by? You're going to have fans coming at you and say, "Wow, you're so great. Here, smoke this." Can I get you something to drink? You're always going to have people that are going to come at you and say, "Hey, man, I got a little something, something." So you're left with making choices, and sometimes difficult choices, because you're out there on your own. You may be in a band, you may be, a member of an entourage, but you can still get away with anything that you want. So you are stuck with choices, and you need to make a decision whether or not the drugs and alcohol are helping you, or whether they've just simply stopped working, or are they hurting you? And in most cases, I found that artists have stepped up to say, "I love my fans, I love my craft, my music, and I have a sense of responsibility to myself, spiritually, to go to a different place where I can continue to do what I do," And, there are people out there who have been at it for many years, and getting up on stage and showing people that, sobriety really, really works. We had Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue on my radio show the other day. And in his interview, he talked about, we started off as this long-haired rock and party heavy metal band, and we just kind of kept growing and growing and growing. But as an artist, when you feel that you've stopped growing, then it's time to look at yourself, and you have to make a choice. Am I going to walk away from this, or am I going to really look at this? In other words, who's winning, my addiction or me?
Actually, it's interesting that you brought that up, because in a lot of my research and other things, I read a lot of autobiographies about certain artists, and also I watched many programs and other things, as well as reading stuff online and many other things. But one of the things I recently watched, I wound up catching it, was Motley Crue's Behind the Music. I mean, it's just ironic how you brought that up. And I remember when I was watching the bio that he said that later in life he found out that his mother and father and many other people in his family were addicts of some kind. So he kind of traced it back when he figured out, okay, I'm an addict and I got to get clean.
Yeah. Tough stuff, huh?
Mm. And I have another interesting one for you. How do you feel about states legalizing marijuana? And do you feel that it should just be for people that need it for medical uses, or should it be available to everyone, or just completely not at all off the table?
Well, I think I need about 2 hours of your time to talk about this that we don't have. But, marijuana was made an illegal Class D substance back in 1937 with the marijuana bill.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, a political move. It was against the medical community to make this substance illegal. And when, most people felt like there might be some use for it. And I'm going to kind of try to stay neutral right now, because I don't want to pretend like I know the answer to that, whether it should be legalized as medical marijuana, and if it has use, its use as an herb or whatever for certain symptoms. What I don't like is that people are in jail because of marijuana when they should be receiving treatment. They're spending taxpayers' dollars on the average of $36,000 a year to incarcerate someone, when we're spending so much money incarcerating someone when we could be spending it on helping them. That's the equivalent of a Harvard education, a year at Harvard. That's what it costs to incarcerate someone. So I kind of hate to see that we're not helping people, that we're incarcerating them. And I also I feel very strongly that we may be rushing into this marijuana piece without all of the evidence. That when a state legalizes medical marijuana, that it's used in certain cases, maybe very effectively. I don't know. I'm not here to say. I'm not an MD. I'm not going to make that call. But we do know that there's a certain effect that it has on the community that is not healthy, and the communities change when dispensaries open up, and criminal behavior changes and is drawn towards that. So I don't know what the answer is. I'm not even going to pretend like I do. If marijuana helps someone, that's great. If it hurts people because of the criminal piece, I'm sorry. My focus is that 10%, that 10.3% of the population that struggle with substance use disorder, and it doesn't matter if it was marijuana or alcohol or whatever it was, they're going to be at risk. And those are the people that I'm concerned with. As far as the medical marijuana piece, I have to stay neutral.
That's okay. You just feel free to put it out there. This is all what you believe and stuff, and it's all just about getting people into treatment. So it's okay.
That's it, man.
Just let it fly. It's all good.
Well, look, 90% of the people out there having a drink can have a drink in safety. 10% can't. Those are my concerns. I deal with the 10%.
And
everyone else can go drink a drink. Fine.
And I've even been around those people that you could be around people that can have one drink or two drinks or whatever, but then you're around the other people that shouldn't even go near a drink.
Absolutely. My wife can have a drink. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's choice.
Okay, let's go into, this is an area that is for anyone, but let's look at these people that prove that recovery works. We've got Eric Clapton, we have Tommy Lee, and we have one of the most well-known actors who have struggled with addiction. We have Robert Downey Jr. I mean, these people, nobody thought that they were going to make it. You had Eric Clapton, who his doctors were telling him, if you don't stop drinking, you're not going to, you won't make it past 3 years. And there's parts of his life he doesn't remember. And then you've got, Tommy Lee, when he was with the Crew, they were doing heroin and cocaine, and there were some nights they needed to come down, so what were they doing? They were putting alcohol in, syringes to inject it into their veins. And then you've got, Robert Downey Jr., where, he would be completely clean, but then there were the triggers that would get him, and it would just set him off, and he would be involved in all this stuff. I mean, it's really a testament that these guys can get help and prove that it works. Or, I mean, most recently, look at Ronnie Wood from the Stones. He's been sober for between 2 or 3 years, and he was on the verge. The Stones were going to tour again, and he had to either get clean or they were going to get a replacement for him because he wound up drinking so much. He's a genius, and it would be a shame to lose that because you're suffering from, an addiction.
Yeah. Well, and I think, to my point earlier that, some of these people, these artists that you're talking about are people who, have been around for a long time, and substance use was a part of their creative process, but they've found as artists that there were perceptions that it was making them a better musician, or perceptions that it was making them a better artist. But the reality is that it was actually hurting them, and they caught it in time. They could have been a part of that list of Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix, but they're not. And they've gone on to write music and express their art, and sometimes it comes from a dark place. It's not all happy and joy, but sometimes they've written some beautiful stuff that needed to be written, that could only have been written in their recovery. My friend Anthony from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, wrote that song Under the Bridge. And I know where that bridge is. I know where he was 23, 4, 5 years ago. That was not a good place. But he got clean and sober, and he chose to write about it. In music and in his book. So for me, it's great that these people are out there and that they're doing whatever they need to do to be clean and sober and celebrate their artistry and their recovery at the same time. It's very, very powerful.
What do you think about teens being so free in terms of social media and just putting it all out there in terms of what they're involved in? Not, good stuff. I'm talking, the non-positive stuff, where they're going out and having fun and doing this and that, and they might not think there's anything wrong with putting that on there, but it can come back to cause them really a lot of problems.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's kind of sad, and that that our society, this new generation, has so much available to them. And I think as an adult, my feeling is that I want to say that you will learn from consequences. That's the way we learn. Carl Jung said that your mistakes are the foundation for your growth and your recovery. That we will learn as we make mistakes, and it's just unfortunate that these young people have so much to work with, you know.
Mm.
The internet is a scary place.
Well, it is a tool for knowledge, but it is a tool for doing harm
Yeah.
to yourself and to other people if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And, you know, they think it's fine to catch up with their friends or whatever, but, you know, I mean, there is a more darker side to it.
Yeah.
And once you put that stuff out there, it's tough to take it back. Is there anything that you want to say that we didn't cover that you feel that needs expression? Because, you know, like I said, by all means, you know, just let it out there.
Well, I just want to say, you know, if someone's looking for help, that help begins when you just pick up the phone and, you know, call Right Turn, 781-646-3800. And we won't judge you, you know. Google our website, just Google Right Turn, and look at what we have to offer, and if it fits you, then please let us help you. No judgment, no shame. We're kind, we're gentle, and we're here for people who need help, you know?
Mm-hmm.